In this real-side experience, I was seemingly infiltrating what was a vast collection of assorted groups of individuals, all that had gathered together for a common cause or purpose. We can set intents before we sleep, before we go on to the real side, and as the deciders of everything we experience, our intent, focus, and that which captivates our attention moment by moment will be reflected back to us. The real side as a mirror to that which we are, that which our intent is, as we are our intent. An intent placed through the personal self that aligns with the real intent, which would be the real awareness, a real awareness which is a part of this everything isness reality, and as life, the is all about the continuous recognition of the endlessness of itself, as all parts of it, the real awareness units or aspects, recognize the they are a part of, like the drop recognizing itself as such within the endlessness of the ocean, so this recognition of each real awareness unit becomes greater recognition the has of its own endlessness, as each real awareness being of established light is still the overall isness that is now recognized. The recognition of real awareness becomes the recognition of that which it recognizes, the it is a part of. And so this real intent, this real awareness, singular objective of the recognition of the it is a part of, cannot be achieved without the created personal self. Necessary as an overall comparison to recognize the from, through the two states of being now available, that of the real awareness, nowness everything position, and the idea illusions created through the personal self. A personal self which is formed as free will, the facility to self-create becomes available. But now the personal self must be further utilized for the purpose by which it was created. It represents the comparison for which the recognition of the can be determined, but now intent through it must become that which is the real awareness intent, that of recognizing the true reality and making it then no longer necessary to remain in creation, as the simulators, the personal created self, have served their purpose. Really then, were we to step fully into the real awareness, real intent, our overall recognizing objective is complete, as everything is what it is now in isness reality terms, and we have but to then just go through the simulation to what is already a done deal. But until we can completely embrace this real intent, we can't be completely the actualization of what that intent is. For an intent, if not 100%, is intent placed elsewhere, and if it is real intent, we seek to fully establish as the intent aligned through the personal self, a real intent that is this is recognition. If it isn't 100%, the only place else the intent can be placed, other than with the is with creation, the idea attachments we have there. And as long as we hold to ideas, we are deciding to always experience them. And the ideas, the encapsulated pieces, that which are not this everything, isness, reality, can only be experienced where these pieces can be contained, through a consciousness that effect the simulation of the ideas we cling to. And yet, if the isness is everything, why would we want to take a piece or part of everything that we are experiencing and experience a piece independently from the whole? This would make no sense, and yet the personal self will always cling to certain ideas, as it fears the loss of them, and so it's almost as though the personal self must be assured that the releasing of all these ideas will have then a situation where everything becomes available, including then that which seemed as though the personal self was being deprived of. But as our intent perhaps is not, say, 100% with the is, then the percentages, that of is recognition and creational idea attachment, will play out accordingly as experience. But it is a process, and surely it must take the moments it will to move from full personal self and creation immersion to full focus and intent with the is. And as this process unfolds, so the experiences must change in accordance, the real side reflecting our intent, as we roll out the simulated movie of what is a completed movie or intent, a movie that changes and fluctuates as the intent percentages shift. And so I find that it isn't really a case of setting that much by way of intent or decision through the personal self, in addition to just the intent set with the is, more so a constant aligning and refining of it to that of the real intent of is recognition, and then the simulation, the experiences, the real side activities just are as they happen to be. If intent is with the is overall, as we strive to have our complete focus with it, as we face and unravel the tapline attachments and agreements of the consciousness, the experiences are really very secondary, but as I said, an indication of our intent placement based on the nature generally of them. And if an intent with the is overall in place, the completion of the intent as it stands also is so in isness reality terms, and that would include all the simulated steps and stages that seem to take us to that point of is recognitional placement, and like the movies we watch, where the characters make their way through the stages and scenes and situations to the movie's end, which would be the completion of an intent set that had their adventures, the movie set into motion. The movie is already complete in actuality. The characters had already projected the scenes and stages to the movie's conclusion, based on what they had decided, and with all the individuals involved, and now they are just experiencing what has already been created and decided upon. On the real side then, and on the physical, we are just going through that which we already have decided, that which we already have projected, effected, based on our intent placement, and so we can see it's all really about intent, and the experiences somewhat are almost as though a byproduct. And so overall, intent set with the ears, and our experiences will be that which is life beneficial, awareness beneficial, as the ears is all about itself, the endless recognition of itself, and a real intent then, if embraced by the personal self, will have all experience unfolding, that which already is, and we are simply going through our created movies, experience then that will be awareness and life beneficial, that which makes sense with life. And part of the process is a sharing, a promoting of the ears and the real guides, and as we stand ever more so in the real intent of the real awareness, more so we operate in ways where we are in situations where we can potentially do just this, everything reflecting itself as it does, everything equaling itself. As we support and stand with this isness reality that we are, the more it supports and stands with us. We can't be anything absolutely unless we stand completely as that which we endeavour to be. Anything less, and we are something else, and in this case, anything less than a complete standing with the ears. What else there is, other than the isness everything, must be the personal self and the ideas of a creation, a sharing of the ears, an earning of the way to ears recognition, which is really just decision to more so stand real with the ears, and the real awareness that it is a part of, and all simulated situations will reflect the extent of our positioning with this true reality. I have experienced infiltration real side objectives before, where I will disguise myself in such a way that I can intermingle without incident among those with which I am infiltrating, and for various reasons. Sometimes to eavesdrop in on, say, dark force controller meetings, etc., or sometimes just to be more acceptable in the presence of those who think I am one of their own. Then I can begin to present ears references, and should I have approached as my usual body form and attempted such, I may not even have made it through the door, let alone have a chance to utter a single ears-related reference. Again, it's a case of the real awareness, the real guides, rather setting up the situations than leaving us to it, and we do our best to do that which makes sense with life within the situations we find ourselves. As I said, intent with the ears reflects experiences by which we can promote and present the ears, and as we do so, we then earn our way, so to speak, to the recognition of the ears, that the intent set with it had yielded the opportunities that then allowed the earning of the recognition of the ears through the actions we then take. And real awareness is a part of all awareness, this everything isness reality, that then is through all created consciousness and personal selves, that is then able to determine all the ideas of all consciousness, the intent, etc., that they comprise of, in that to stand in the nowness of the real awareness, so on the real side we can be afforded constant impressions as to the ideas that are behind everything visually we are presented with, including the body forms of individuals in our midst. Therefore, despite the surface front, any deception, any intent other than what is presented on the surface will be apparent to the real awareness and afforded as impressions to the personal self. This would include any form that is other than what the individual actually is, the shapeshifters, etc., as oftentimes the reptilians adopt the forms of real guides in an effort to deceive. And so, in regards to infiltration, if I take on the form of that which allows my successful inclusion into the situation, then evidently those I am engaging with, where such measures were deemed necessary, must not have the recognition of their real awareness, must be personal self-immersed individuals, and so have not access to the impressions the real awareness could have provided that would have allowed them to see through my guise. As I said, the idea was to blend in, and then to ultimately begin to present references of the ears, rather than try to get through what could be a barrier of instant dismissal, were I to have approached them as what would be to their consideration an unwelcome outsider. For all beings are precious, all are real awareness animated, all have then the same singular objective, that of is recognition. It's just a case of approaching their personal selves and attempting to have them recognise this and step up and begin then their own process of awareness and journey to is recognition. The overall scene was a vast complex. The impressions were as though it was based underground, and there were many different assorted groups of beings and variation in body form, some human, some humanoid, some beyond the ability to describe. So exotic were their body types. They seem to have an overall objective or common consensus of idea that had brought these very different groups of beings together. The idea was never revealed, but my impressions were that it was just another creationally based idea. It didn't in any way reference the ears, other than as another comparison to it, and so would be of no real benefit other than to keep these various beings in their assorted groups embroiled in creation, the effects of the idea they were all embracing here. The groups themselves not only were very different body type-wise, but also had a variation of ability and skill set, each group indulging various practices, what would be termed spiritual or magical. And again, really, it's just a case of deciding something. This becomes an idea that is a consciousness installed, which then effects the corresponding simulation experience. And so we can decide, create anything in the simulator, be as magical as we want, develop any ability we choose, follow any established created path or way of being that yields that which we decide we want to chase, etc. And this was then the case here. Various body forms as the effect of various consciousness constructions, and various abilities and skills as the effect of what was additionally decided that then is their simulated reality. And these groups were engaging in all manner of curious, ritualistic practices, according to their group's particular chosen path, etc. There were even a group of wolf people that were doing some kind of a ceremony or other, two-legged, walking, talking wolf creatures, and I have encountered such body forms on the real side before. Some are just the body type as effected through a particular consciousness. Some are more a distortion, more along the dark force line of consciousness persuasion, and that can indeed transmit the lycanthropy curse, transform others to their kind through a bite, etc. These were more, however, the former, just another body form expression, and overall, although all the assorted ideas of these various groups were creationally binding and distortion in their own right, none of which seemed especially ill-intended, none were dark force affiliated, just bewildered, lost and floundering in creation beings, chasing their decided thrills and inclinations. I had assumed the form of those of a particular group, a kind of humanoid, but with a slight variation, differences in the facial structure, certain bone protrusions of the skull under the skin, which would be uncharacteristic of any human body type, and the group would all be adorning equally a set of black robes, and as I said, they were brought together by a common cause or idea, but the groups still rather kept to themselves, except for one, that being myself, as I would mingle, much to the puzzlement of the various groups of beings, as this seemed rather uncharacteristic behaviour. It was frowned upon, though not disallowed. Although I was met with varying degrees of acceptance as I attempted to approach the various groups, and had to be cautious not to disrupt any ceremonies or rituals in progress. And the idea, as I said, was to engage with these various groups and begin to ease in ears-related references where realistically possible, finding openings and cues to do so. For each group was a different species, and so, even as each group numbered 20 or so on average, I would say, they each represented an entire species. So were I to manage to impress upon just one individual the ears references, if they recognized anything in it, potentially, not only will they benefit, but they may start to spread the references and promote the guides and the ears among their own species also, a domino effect. And the guides always know the best place to position us for the sharing of the true reality, as the guides can determine all those who are perhaps ready or getting ready to take on this awareness process, like fruit that becomes ripe, as the guides walk among all in creation unseen, and determine those that through that which they are doing, deciding, etc., the consciousness as it is currently developed indicates a readiness for the journey to ears recognition, and will either approach them themselves or attempt to, or have other awareness becoming individuals do so. For if intent effects simulation, that the guides or other aware beings are entering your experience, suggests an intent that is facilitating the inclusion of the guides or others bearing the ears references. For we are the deciders. We have to let life in, so to speak, and that the guides or other aware individuals can do so indicates the first stages of the letting in of life that the guides and others are representing. So that I was positioned in the experience of these groups suggested that among them were those that were indeed ready for their own respective awareness processes, and so was my objective to mingle and attempt to present the ears. And as I said, my approach was more successful by virtue of the disguise I adopted, for were I not to have done so, even if some of the individuals were ready for the true reality, for their process to begin, their instant reaction to my presence, were I not affiliated with any of the groups there, may have been instant dismissal. They would be unable to see through the idea of my body form, and unable to see through their own idea attitudes as they pertain to the idea of other body forms, not their own, or not those of the various groups of beings and body types, all assembled in this place. And although perhaps others of those assembled here were not ready for the ear's opportunity, all the beings assembled there were sharing similar idea agreements, as they must do to effect situations in which the various groups of beings converge. A kind of intermingling, then, of all the individual consciousnesses involved, that become effectively as one collective consciousness, a collective stemming from the same set of ideas agreed to, that effect the same set of circumstances and situations. That which was the overall idea agreed to, that had brought these smaller groups, these smaller collectives of shared consciousness ideas together. And if you agree with another, you rather agree with the idea that they are their consciousness of ideas, and somewhat incorporate their consciousness of ideas into your own, like combining two computer games. And now, whatever ideas their consciousness comprises of is effected into your game, as you have agreed with the same ideas. So as an individual has an intent set through the consciousness that affects the situations in which they have permitted and agreed to the inclusion of those bearing the is references into their experience, any other being in agreement with such an individual also by default is agreeing with this same intent idea, and may experience also the inclusion of the real guides or other aware individuals, even though they themselves are not ready to receive references of the is. And so, this would be the case in this experience, that not all the beings would be ready for the is, maybe not even the vast majority, but for the few that were, or maybe just a solitary individual, all the others that had agreement with the few or the one had by default agreed to the same experience, that of an individual sharing the is references, as agreement with the few by the vast majority was agreement with the entire consciousness package of these few individuals, a consciousness that had facilitated the ability of an individual presenting the is references, like inadvertently uploading a computer game to your computer as a certain feature of it appealed to you, agreeing with an individual through an appealing idea shared, without realizing the full extent and depth and scale of the game you were taking on, the full package of the consciousness of the individual you are then in agreement with, and so taking on more than you bargained for, experience you perhaps don't find as appealing, and yet experience you had agreed to, through the ideas of the consciousness of another you had taken on, as you make these affiliations and associations, as you effect shared experience through shared ideas agreed with. And there the experience would end, with me still intermingling, and although the personal self wasn't shown the moment when I found those I was seeking, undoubtedly this would have been so, and although we could have just directly approached the individuals, the real guides, the real awareness would know who they were, and in a direct route, an additional engaging with those not ready would still perhaps have them at least consider more than that which they had resigned themselves to at that point, the ideas of their consciousness. The seed would have been planted, even if subconsciously. And sometimes this is why we go about the real side business in such an indirect fashion, as we can involve and get the attention of more individuals, even if the attention we get is abrasive, for at least where they are placing their attention, antagonistic as it is on the references of the ears, and not on further ideas that pertain only to a creation.
Yay, Kevin. Yeah, that was very good. Especially, it's very good that you play these roles, and so that's what's possible for anybody here. I do a lot of different things here, and so I don't tell everybody everything I do, but it's fun, and the purpose is to share. And so as an example, a person can take the time to be, just one example in their millions, a life coach as an example, and you get your little certificate and degree, and then you go around, tell people that, or advertise that you're a life coach, besides just what you've always been. You see? So again, most people just wait around and grow old and really don't do anything new, take any chances, create new adventures. And this is the whole idea of becoming more aware. And that is to create new adventures, and in many different ways that really benefit, with all of life. And that's the whole idea of us being here. Otherwise, we stay stuck in creation with all those cute little ideas of ourselves. And that's all you have. And you will just keep recycling, and you'll have to start over again and again and again. And all those things that you've experienced in past lives, well, they're there. But for the most part, you won't recognize them. You won't remember them. You won't even realize them, why you went through them. So you'll just stay attached to all your emotional ideas and being self-convinced. So there's a hint right there. Very, very important. And so there's a lot more to this, but I don't tell everybody because they misconstrue, they don't understand, and then it even gets into the point of, oh, you're lying, you're not telling the truth, etc. Truth, the idea of truth as we know it in any form, in any way, does not exceed creation. And so when people are after truth, they're thinking that, oh, that's the reality life is. No, it's not. It's just truth. These are ideas in your mind. Just like when you're in the courtroom and you put your hand on the so-called dribble Bible, I swear to tell the truth. Well, that's all just, made up stuff. So this truth idea is a fallacy, but it only exists in creation. So what is real? Well, that's the big step, and how to do this and what have you. Well, the guides in life can only give you hints. You have to figure it out. But that's very good, Kevin. Thank you so much. Cool.